And I'm not lying when I say we're America's #1 career employment job show in the country. It's called Job Talk1. If you're tuning in for the first time, we're going to be on every day here pretty soon. My partner, Tom Cairns. Tom was the HR director for Homeland Security, but more importantly, he was the HR director for NBC Studios. We're working on getting a little bing, 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 right? And of course, our very special guest for the hour, Bob Preziosi. He's at Nova, Southeastern University in Florida. He runs the Wayne Huizenga School of Business and Management. Great personality. He's fun to have on. We're going to keep him over because, Tommy, you and I mean, you hear me talking about it all the time. You and I are the same age. We come from a generation where we started early, we ended late. You never watched a clock. I never watched a clock. I don't know about Professor Bob. He probably has a big clock around his, But when you look, Professor Bob, at what's going on in the country right now, these young kids, and you're around these young kids all the time. So we may get into a little bit of a discussion here. So if you're driving your car, pull over to the right. Just keep your hands on both wheels. Also, we got to thank the fire department. We got to thank the police department here in Southern California. They worked overtime. It's like 101 here today. High humidity, high heat. These police officers in Southern California, especially in Santa Clarita,
4,000 of them,
and our firemen. Yesterday, I'm at In-N-Out Burger. A bunch of them came in. Everybody stood up and got applause. Can you believe that?
Wow.
And bought their meal. They couldn't buy their meals. Isn't that cool?
Excellent.
Yeah. So thank you, police officers and firemen. God bless you, and hope you live to be 120. That was the same age of Moses. So back to the millennials, Professor Bob and Tom Cairns. Here's my starting point. I don't think, I'm talking about an employee now, don't get into this entrepreneurial stuff. I think as an employee, their work ethic, their want to, and let me lay it out for you. When I was 20 years old, I wanted to buy a house. What most 20-year-olds today, Tommy Cairns, they want to buy the next iPad. I don't think their dreams are big enough. Yes or no, Professor Bob?
I would say that when I was 20, and I'm older than you two guys, I did not want to buy a house. But that was just me. And I think that's the key there, Coach. You look at what millennials do or don't do, what boomers do and don't do, and they have tendencies, yes. But, I've got an armload of data from the Center for Creative Leadership, from Oracle, from SAP, that suggests that it's not all of them all of the time. For example, if you say that everybody likes respect, fair treatment, and flexibility, wouldn't you say that's true of boomers and millennials and Xers? But if you read some of the stuff written about millennials, they say it is millennials that want respect, fair treatment, and flexibility. The first time I read that, I almost threw up.
Well, wait a second. Tommy's going to jump in. Professor, I love you to death. You're a cast member. You're going to be on a regular on the show. But I got to disagree with you, man. I don't remember, and be honest with you, Tommy, I don't remember getting a vacation until I was like in my late 40s. We didn't talk about work-life balance. Anyway, jump in, Tommy. I'm going to take a breath here.
There's a couple points. One of those aspects, I do think there are areas of similarity to the boomers and the millennials. So it's a generalization. One brush doesn't fit everybody. So I see some things that I did when I began employment that I see other millennials doing today. What I would say though is I don't see that universally. So those would be more the exception, perhaps, in terms of I worked while I was going to college. There wasn't a time that I didn't. I needed to. Today, students are traveling. They're able to take advantage of other aspects that maybe I wasn't able to at that time because I couldn't afford to do that. I don't know if the millennials today can afford to do that because they're also putting that as part of their school bill.
Well, here's a young lady who's actually old school that pulled something and it didn't work. Melissa Mayer, you know who she is? That name ring a bell? Melissa Mayer?
Yes.
Sure.
You know who she is.
Sure,
So she was the CEO, still is the CEO of Yahoo that just sold. And I don't know, I mean, Facebook and all these other social media sites really challenged Yahoo. But she's been paid $139.6 million over the last 4 years for doing what? I mean, this whole part of it is, so her deal, the reason I'm bringing her up is, remember she said nobody else is, I mean, she was I'm going to say somewhat of an idiot, because remember she said you can't work from home anymore.
Right.
Don't get pregnant on the job because you may not have a job. I mean, how did she stay CEO? Because she's working with just exactly that crew, the millennial crew, and you wonder why Yahoo got challenged.
Well, there's a couple aspects, and then Bob, you can jump in there. I use this as a case study in my classes to look at how would you have.
I forgot you're a professor too.
And so one of the aspects, though, because she came over and was really very successful at Google, and a lot of that was on product development and Gmail and other sorts of things she did, but she brought over some of the experiences she had there and repeated those in Yahoo, assuming that because they worked at Google, such as working in their office area, and Google has a whole big setup that nobody wants to go home because they don't have to. They have all the comforts of home at work. She thought, well, I'll bring that experience here, and that was anti to the culture.
All the comforts of home at work. So you and I were going to talk about. Bob, why don't you sit back and take a sip of your fine bourbon whiskey, because I want to say something to Tom Cairns here. She brought,
let it rip.
Yeah, sit back, let it rip. So she brings the home to work. You and I were talking about it at lunch or breakfast the other day. The culture at work isn't work. How much work is getting done at work, right?
That's
How much
true.
work is getting done? He's a big time professor. So he's getting big money for teaching 3 hours a day. That's another. When he comes back in a couple of weeks, that's another issue I have. These college professors, as far as I'm concerned, why don't they get paid minimum wage? You know, but don't get crazy on me, Bob. Don't get crazy. But Bob, jump
the
in.
wrong guy here.
Yeah, I figured. But both of you jump in on this. Do you think?
First of all, Ron, you're right.
Thank you. Finally.
The situation that we set up for college professors is really oriented to lots and lots of work. But I can tell you there are exceptions to that, up and down.
No, I don't want to pick on college professors. What I want to say, what Tommy just said. Tommy Cairns, my partner on the show we call Job Talk 1. Go to jobtalk1.com. Brought to you by Lisa's Tax Service and Pools by Ben. And I'm telling you right now, if you got a swimming pool, you'd be smart to call Pools by Ben. The point I was making, Professor Bob, was that you go to work 8 hours a day. Tommy, how much work is getting done?
Well, in theory, I would say probably maybe 4 or 5 hours on a good day.
Yeah, but listen, you guys have to go back and look at the history of what's going on with work. You know, in the old days, not the real old days, but when we were all manufacturing and everything was set up on an assembly line, it was real easy for people to be productive, machines used fast and all that. Then we started getting to work that was more head-oriented, quote unquote. Now, the measures do exist to look at how productive people are. I mean, productivity, I've been eating, sleeping, and drinking since 1983. The problem is how we manage people, how we organize resources. I mean, I can remember talking to people who, when they needed to get a box of ballpoint pens, had to get 3 requisitions signed. And then how come it took a week to get them there? Well, maybe because they were coming from Mars. Well, not really. They were coming from, God knows where they were coming from. But we have set up in the United States, and probably in a lot of other countries, management, leadership, organization of resources and people that work against productivity. The United States used to be number one in the competitive index, which is a measure of productivity used to measure internationally. They've been as low as 13 this century and even late in the last century. So, yeah, we're hurting when it comes to productivity, but it's because we don't lead and manage people and resources very well, and it can be done. You are a cybermetrics analyst, Coach, and I think what we haven't done is teach people how to measure and analyze and use metrics to determine whether a person ought to be getting 10 of those done a day or one of those done a day. We've done a crappy job with that, a real crappy job. So, and that's for millennials, that's for Xers, that's for boomers, that's for everybody.
That's I was reading a statistic the other day, and it actually could be a topic for another Job Talk 1 show on employee engagement, where there could be as high as anywhere between 70 to almost even 90% of employees disengaged or not engaged actively in the job. So when you were asking me about the 8, I mean, I would like to think that all the people that I worked with were working really hard, but the reality is if you got 70% that are not engaged somewhere in that 8-hour day, how much are you really getting out of that individual? And we come back to the millennials. One of the aspects of millennials is that they also frequently change jobs. And I was looking at it from the standpoint of when they go to work, they're looking at it from a project-oriented viewpoint. So their job is, I'm working on this project, and when I'm done with that, I want to go on to the next thing.
So boy, you're hitting all the high spots today. The show's called Job Talk 1. That's my partner, Tommy Cairns. I'm the coach, Coach Ron Tunick. You go to Coach Tunick, TUNICK.com, and of course our buddy in Florida, a little bit north of Fort Lauderdale, Bob Preziosi. He's running the Huizenga School of Management, a bunch of other stuff. So you just nailed something there. When you look at, the three of us didn't have cell phones. The three of us didn't have the internet. The three of us didn't have all the distractions. So we have so many distractions that take us away from the task. I mean, people go to work, they're looking at something on the internet, they're looking at something on Facebook. I mean, you ran Homeland Security you ran the HR. I'm sure you had employees, well, I don't even want to get into some of the things they were doing on the internet, but we know what they were doing on the internet. So the distractions, how do we get away from these distractions and Professor Bob, you nailed it. So if the distractions are causing a loss of productivity, you wonder why our economy is stagnant, and you wonder why people aren't getting raises. I rest my case.
Well, and you mentioned one of the aspects of distractions, and I'll make a philosophical observation then, is why would a Google bring more distractions into the workplace and thinking that's going to increase productivity? What do you think about that, Bob? I mean, in the aspect of the breakout, all the things that they offer, that can really, I want to be creative, so I can go off into this room, I can play basketball, I can walk across campus. I mean, that's a distraction.
You're asking the wrong person. They're there to make a profit. They're going to maximize everything they can.
No, but I'm just
do you
saying,
think they care about you and me?
As you're saying, you want to increase productivity and decrease distractions. Are the practices that are being done doing that? Are they creating more opportunity for distractions? And I would say they're creating the opportunity for more distractions in some ways, if not managed properly.
It's a big subject. Next week on the show, if you tune in to Job Talk 1 next week, we're going to be on daily here pretty soon, but next week at 2 o'clock, we're going to have an employer, and we're going to start doing employer profiles. This is a wonderful way for you to meet the owners of the company and find out what their culture is, what their mission statement is. We can help you get a job, I promise you. Just tune in every week to Job Talk 1. Pretty soon we'll be on every day at 1 o'clock here in Southern California, and pretty soon all over the country. The syndicators love what we're doing, and you love what we're doing. We get your emails, we get your texts. So when you look at Professor Bob, who is talking to these young people, what are they saying? Tell us the truth. Don't hold back. What are they saying about the job market, and what are they saying about careers and stuff like that?
Well, the ones I hang around with have a pretty good feeling for being successful and doing what it takes to be successful. So from that perspective, I've got to say they're probably not your normal millennials. I know someone 23 years old who's working like from 8:30 in the morning until 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and the job only pays about $45,000 a year.
Well, $45,000 a year here in Southern California, I don't know what you'd qualify for. I mean, that's the other thing. That's another thing. The cost of living. That'll be another show. Will you come back on? Can you do some homework, Professor Bob? Talking to Professor Bob Preziosi, who runs the Huizenga School of Management. Can you do some homework in the next couple of weeks? Because doesn't the cost of living has to have an effect on a career you're going to choose, right, Tommy Cairns?
It sure does. Well, it's more than just the career you're going to choose, but it's also where you're going to live. You know, there's a friend of mine whose son is up in New York now, 25 years old, just calling on people. And the dad said, "Why are you going to New York? Everything is so much more expensive up there. There's income tax up there." And he just said, "I just want to be in New York." And I said, "Okay, well, that's nice. I just want to be in San Diego, but I never moved there. I stayed here because everything seemed to work out very well here." So the choices that kids are making are sometimes influenced by some of the wrong variables, quote unquote. And so when they're influenced by the wrong variables, they don't all make good decisions. And I can't help them. I can't make decisions for them. You know, at some point, they got to be making their own decisions and doing their own thing. And millennials are doing more and more of that, but I think they've taken a turn on a path that's probably not going to be good longer term for the American economy in general. And I think, like Tom says, we're going to have to look at organizations more carefully, find ways to engage them in the work, find better ways to measure the work, and find better ways to reward and compensate them so that we're not just paying for time put in. I mean, isn't that ridiculous? Paying somebody for the time they put in. It's just like paying a baseball player in 2017 $5 million when the last time he hit 50 home runs was 2013. You know, things are out of whack in terms of.
Well, don't get me please don't get me started on professional sports or the money they make. I'm going to bid you goodbye. We'll see you in 2 weeks. His name is Bob Preziosi. He's going to be a great part of our cast because he's smart, he's honest, he's straightforward, and he's fun. He runs the Huizenga School of Management and Careers at Nova Southeastern University. What a pleasure to have you on the show and become a regular, and it's neat. Do your homework. You remember what we're going to talk about in 2 weeks.
I will. Thanks for having me on your show today, Coach. Take good care.
Keep listening at hometownstation.com, and you can also go to jobtalk1.com. Going to come right back, and you can listen to the show. Download the app. Don't forget, on your Droid or iPhone, go to the App Store. Do it, Professor Bob. Download the app. It's called KHTS AM 1220, because we got about 6 minutes left when we come back from break. And Tom Cairns and I are going to talk about something that may be interesting for you to hear. It could be life-changing for one of you out there. We're going to come right back on the show we call JobTalk1.com. Dedicating the show to Phil Raymond. It's neat to have a friend. He's just one of the great guys in Santa Clarita. Grew up here. Phil Raymond is his name. He's in advertising, and you know, it's nice, Tommy, to have a friend. So our show is called Job Talk 1. We just had a great, it was a nice visit with a real college professor that knows this stuff. Wasn't it refreshing to listen to him?
Absolutely. He was, I mentioned this, but the audience doesn't know that he was very influential in my life when I was in South Florida. So, and still has, so he's become a good friend.
So before the break, I said that maybe we can help one person, maybe we can really influence one person decision, a life decision, and that is when you go out to get a job or a career, if you make the wrong decision, it can literally cost you 3, 4, 5 years, even more. And here's what I mean, is that if you're going to get a job, you're not an entrepreneur, and we're going to have segments on entrepreneurs. I mean, that's my gig, But you were the HR director of Homeland Security, the HR director for NBC Studios, so you know all the stuff that goes on in the world of working for somebody. So if you pick the wrong company with the wrong boss, you're in trouble. Because that boss, I can remember, I had the right bosses. I mean, you talk about having an angel on your shoulder. I was lucky. I had the right bosses that inspired me when I was like 21 years old. They would sit down and talk to me like a father. I had no father. They knew I didn't have a father, but they would sit down and talk to me. They would take extra time with me. Think about it if you get the wrong boss.
Yes.
Think about if you get the wrong job. So let's talk about making decisions, doing your homework, doing your research. How would you go about doing it if you want to literally go and work for somebody? How do you go about doing that research, that decision making?
Well, let's assume for the first part that people know what they want to do. So sometimes that's not always the obvious aspect, and so a lot of people will spend some time trying to figure out what it is that they really want to do. And I would recommend there are various assessments and things that can help you zero in on the things that you're interested in and what you like.
Which I don't believe in. I mean, you and I disagree on a lot of stuff. I don't believe that. You know what I did? I had 100 jobs in my 20s. And really,
well, you know what? How I discovered what I wanted to do in HR was the fact that I was an accounting major in school and knew that I'm never going to graduate with this accounting degree, and if I did, I don't want to do this. So I actually ended up reading a college catalog and saying, oh, that course sounds interesting, and then out of that, discovered what I really enjoyed and wanted to pursue. So the kind of assessments that I'm talking about are ones that help you zero in on the areas of your interests and the things that you like, and help give you a target to say that there's actually a job associated with that. So assuming you know what you want to do, then you can start to look for various companies. And I'm like you too. I didn't do this aspect where you want a company that meets the values that you have. And so when you're researching companies, like, I don't want to name a company, but say there's certain aspects that, I like that company because I see it on TV, or I see it on the field that people are wearing.
I think we can talk about public companies because they're in the public place.
Well, I'm just saying, for example, so Google comes to mind, right? So a lot of people say, well, I want to go work for Google.
Right.
But are all the things about Google fit what you are as an individual? And so you want to be able to try to match that up. So one of the things that I would suggest is looking for companies that, first of all, know what your values are, and then try to find companies that match that value, research it.
And that's all good advice. So is there a way for, if I go to work for Google, is there a way for me to meet my boss to see if there's a fit? Because, I had 100 jobs in my 20s, and, what the employer, and we're going to talk about this in the coming weeks. Also, next week, I want to talk about what is HR. Can we talk about that for a segment?
Sure.
But one of the things that I learned in my early 20s is the employers lied to me about what the job was about. So they would advertise the job as this, and when I got there, it was that. I mean, and I quit like 2 or 3 days later. I said, that's ridiculous, I'll
have to dig up the article, but there was one I just read just a couple weeks ago, how to know when your employer is lying to you.
Yeah.
And so we can.
That's a great topic. Write that down. You're going to forget that. Write that down. We need to do a whole segment, because I have so many stories about employers lying to me about what the job was when I actually showed up for work. And
becomes different than what they described. Sure.
Yeah.
And that's not uncommon. I mean, that happens more.
So I would
often
spend
than
more
not.
time. We only have a minute left. You're listening to Job Talk 1. Tommy Cairns and the coach were here every week, soon to be every day on KHTS, our flagship station in Southern California, KHTS AM 1220. But spend more time. If you're out there, if you're young, well, nobody's listening to our show under 40, but if you're over 40 and you're going to change jobs or careers, try to interview your actual boss. Try to spend time with your actual boss. See if your personalities are going to fit, because you might be the greatest thing since sliced bread, but for some reason there's a personality that doesn't work. I mean, if you're a football nut like I am, and Tommy, you're a soccer guy, maybe we're not going to fit. you know?
Absolutely.
You know, and so try to do your homework, try to do your investigation, try to spend more time. And I think the right leader, the right boss would appreciate that. Am I wrong there? If I said to you, can I have another meeting or two, would you resent that if I'm interviewing for a job?
No, not at all. I would want to have that individual. That would create a lot of curiosity on my part, so that person was really, like you said, doing their homework, wanting to know us, that they would be a good fit as much as we want to know if they're going to be a good fit. So we don't have to rush into this relationship.
And real people, and I love what you just said. We got to go. See you next week. JobTalk1.com will be on next week and soon to be on every day.